I want to hear what your interpretation of what time is first.
Yeah, well, you know, this is a time really doesn't exist. Clocks exist. Time doesn't exist. So we're living in a matrix that's basically written on mathematics called Adinkra codes. And these Adinkra codes go all the way back to the Dogons. Dogon tribes out of Mali, Africa.
Yeah, your relationship with astronomy and whether you believe astrology to be a true science or not.
We got to realize that we're better together than apart. Not tearing each other down, fighting each other, slapping each other, all this kind of crazy stuff.
Yeah.
We got to come together and we got to realize, man, how can I bring a piece of the puzzle? How can you bring a piece of the puzzle?
So today, I want to introduce you to none other than the most powerful, prolific brother known as Mr. Billy Carson.
Hey, thank you, man. Appreciate
Welcome.
you having me on.
Absolutely.
Thank you for the great introduction.
First thing I wanted to talk about was time itself.
Yeah.
You know, and the ideas of time. There's a lot of people that's trapped into increments of time that they have to work in, you understand me, from a 9 to 5 position, and they have to live within windows of hours and dissect their days based on that.
Yeah.
I want to hear what your interpretation of what time is first.
Yeah, well, you know, this is a very deep question. I've talked about this so many times in different lectures and workshops, you know, because what people in the third dimension, we're in the third dimension, what we tend to not understand is that time really doesn't exist. Clocks exist. Time doesn't exist.
Right.
And like you said, we've been given this functional arrow of time, which puts us in one specific direction, so that we can organize our thoughts and our days and our years and weeks and what we're going to do and where we're going to meet up with somebody and everything else. So we have this ability to coordinate and collaborate with each other, like how we're here today at this specific time. However, if you understand that time is also an illusion, it's something that you can use as a tool, but if you also understand that it's an illusion, then you can actually master time and you can maximize what you're doing on this planet. Because if you go in all the higher dimensions, you know, we're in the third, fourth, fifth, sixth,
So
and all the way up.
for the layman that don't understand what being in the third dimension means, can you give us a breakdown?
Okay, sure. So if you draw a line on a piece of paper, that's the first dimension. If you then connect those lines and create a house on a piece of paper, that's a two-dimensional structure, or you can move that into a computer. Anything you see in a computer that looks 3D is actually 2D. Right? So, and because we're in the third, we can see down into 2D, we can see all the way down, obviously, into 1D, and we can manipulate those dimensions from our higher selves. Now, now there are beings in fourth, fifth, and sixth dimensions. There's people above us. Now, because of that, they see us, and they recognize the past, present, and future operating all at the same time. Everything's happening at once.
Right.
There is no separation between the past, present, and the future. The arrow doesn't exist. Because they're higher than us, they can look down into the third, and they can see into what we're doing.
So, you know, talking about third dimension, right? You know, it's ants are not third dimensional beings, right? Because they can't see upward, right? They're not horizontal, you understand me? They exist on a plane where they're looking forward, right? So when you're moving about the rest of the world that is higher up to them, they have no access to that, no perspective on that whatsoever. What I wanted to get though with next though, so let's say we got the third dimension, right? Now we're talking about the fourth dimension, right? What is the fourth dimension?
The fourth dimension is something called a tesseract. And if you go into the ancient text, it's Metatron's cube. Meta, M-E-T-A, meta, obviously, you know, the metaverse, right? They got that from Metatron's cube. It's a fourth dimensional substructure. Now this fourth dimension is really something called a quasi-crystal. And this quasi-crystal in the fourth dimension, it casts a shadow. And the shadow that it casts, it creates the realm that we're living in here. We're living in a shadow of a higher dimension. That shadow creates a third dimension. It actually creates a fractal of it, creates this fractal holographic matrix that we're actually maneuvering in the third dimension right now.
So would the fourth dimension be considered a dimension of time?
You can address a fourth dimension of time like Albert Einstein was saying if you're just looking at a third plus a fourth being the arrow. But when you actually move up into another dimension, we now know in quantum physics that there is actually a fourth dimension. So all dimensions are in 90-degree angles of each other. And according to quantum theory right now, we're really anticipating that there's at least 11 dimensions, or otherwise the universe would collapse. So there really is truly a fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, all the way up, not just the arrow of time. That's just something extra. They try to make it make sense back then by saying the fourth dimension is time, but time is actually not a dimension at all.
But you said something about beings, right? Now, we always look at ourselves as people, but then when we talk about people, you're talking about human beings, right? The being part is not something that the average person understands, right? And then when you're saying that there are other beings, who are these other beings?
I believe personally, just based off of my research, and I've gone through now over 1,000 scriptures, texts, papyruses, cuneiform tablets from all over the world. They all have a very similar story. And all these ancient civilizations talk about beings, not just beings who came here from other planets, people that look like us and we look like them. In other words, not identical, but very similar. In other words, a bilateral, bipedal hominid of some type that can maneuver around, that has appendages that can manipulate the environment, because without that, you can't move out into space and other places. And they also talk about multidimensional. You get into like the Nag Hammadi and stuff like that. You're talking about multidimensional beings. And so in physics, in quantum physics in particular, they started theorizing on these dimensions and were able to even analyze and discover some that they actually do exist. And on top of that, they realized that the dimensions are packed so tight on top of one another that if you can phase shift your atomic structure, your subatomic frequency, you can walk right into another dimension. And so they started postulating, what if beings from higher dimensions are some of these apparitions and these paranormal phenomena that we're seeing, are they able to maybe take a glimpse or a peek? Are they phasing through into our universe? And so from higher dimensions. And so they started really theorizing it. It seems to be, and based on my research, that there's people living everywhere. Not just, and I'm not talking about little green men with antenna. I think that there's people living all throughout this universe in the third dimension. And I think there's people living all throughout even higher multiple dimensions, maybe at a certain level, a certain height in those dimensions. Maybe they don't have a real corporeal body.
Right, non-physical.
Non-physical, you know what I'm saying? But I believe that the consciousness is there.
When you're talking about time, you're talking about light, you're talking about all of these different ways in which light or energy can exist within, and consciousness, right? The awareness of, output, you understand, mathematical output, right? Do you believe that the universe is mathematical?
Oh, absolutely. The language of God is mathematics, because mathematics can literally explain everything that we experience and everything also that exists. Even the fact that we're existing in a light matrix can be proven through mathematics. So we're living in a matrix that's basically written on mathematics called Adinkra codes. And these Adinkra codes go all the way back to the Dogons, the Dogon tribes out of Mali, Africa. They actually originated these codes, and they were given these codes by the Nomo, and they learned them. They drew them out as art forms. But now, and they put them on clothing and blankets and everything else.
So the Dogon tribe, very interesting tribe. The idea of the Dogon people being able to chart systems, how were they able to figure that out? You understand me? Before the Europeans had an idea of what was out there.
Right. Well, to be honest with you, if you go all the way back to the ancient Dogon history, before they got to Mali, they were in the land of Kem. They were the original inhabitants of the land of Kem before it was called Egypt. And so...
Kem meaning the land of blacks?
The land of blacks, correct. Exactly, land of blacks. Kem was black, it's all black. That's in the tablets. They, according to their records and their handed-down verbal history, their records are etched into caves and stuff like that. The Nomo came here from Sirius B. Okay, so there's a trinary star system that we know of called Sirius, the Sirius star system, A, B, and C. B is a failed star. In other words, it ran out of fuel, turned into a white dwarf. These beings were orbiting on a planet that orbited that star, according to the Dogon, not me. Came here, they're called the Nomo. The Dogon called them the Nomo. Taught them all about the star system, the orbital pattern, our entire solar system, the names, the shapes, the sizes, the colors of all the planets in our solar system, all the planetary alignments. And they even knew that that white dwarf star was so gravitationally heavy that one spoonful couldn't be lifted by over 1 million men. They even knew that. We learned that in quantum mechanics and quantum physics in the 1970s, 1980s. We hypothesized it. And obviously, we couldn't even see that star until the 1980s, 1970s, I'm sorry.
So when did they When did they record it?
Thousands of years ago.
Thousands
Thousands.
of years ago.
It's like, we're talking about over 6,000, 7,000 years. They've had depictions of them and everything else, and they taught them how to make these Dogon masks, but they also gave them the Adinkra codes. Now, these Adinkra codes look like designs on clothing and patterns. When you turn these designs into three-dimensional structures, they become something called error-correcting codes. And Professor James S. Gates, a black professor who used to be the science advisor for Obama when he was in office, he's now the professor, I believe, at the University of Maryland in supersymmetry and theoretical physics. He discovered these Adinkra codes. He rediscovered them, obviously, and he turned them into three-dimensional objects. And then from there, he found the error-correcting codes. He was analyzing and accessing information about the ether of space-time, and he discovered that the entire ether, in other words, everything this soup that we're operating in throughout the entire universe, is running on a specific code. It's called an Adinkra code. It's called error-correcting codes. The same exact kind of codes that run search engines and web browsers. That's what's running the universe.
So listen now. At certain points in time in the interview, the glasses got to come off. This was one of those points in time when we're talking about Adinkra codes and going into multidimensional aspects of thinking. You know, I want to talk about, I don't want to leave time in the star system just yet, but I do want to talk about your relationship with astronomy and whether you believe astrology to be a true science or not.
Well, I'm actually an amateur astronomer.
Okay.
I've been doing that for a long time.
Yes, sir.
I have a real nice telescope. I have a Celestron SLR, and it's a real nice telescope. You can actually see the rings of Saturn. You can see Jupiter. You can see Mars.
Yeah.
I took a famous picture that's been circulating for years of Mars during the summer. When you take a picture of Mars during the summer, it actually has green, it has blues. It's not a red planet. You can see that the ice caps are smaller, which means they've melted. There's a lot of liquid water on the planet. And a lot of those greens, I believe, is vegetation. And now all the science data is coming back out from NASA. Now, all of a sudden, press releases are coming out. The soil on Mars is better for growing crops than on Earth. Now they're saying there's billions of tons of liquid water on Mars now.
Yeah, I can believe that.
And they're also talking about the fact that there's an atmosphere that is equivalent to being like 18,000 feet above sea level, but that's like going to Peru. I'm going to Peru in a few weeks, right? So same thing. You got to acclimate to that height, to that low oxygen, but you can still breathe as long as you stay close to the ground. Once you go higher up, it's going to be very dangerous. But if you're within like 10 feet of the ground, you can actually breathe. You just need to acclimate. So all of a sudden, all this is coming out because why? They're getting ready to build an infrastructure up there, in my opinion, and do a breakaway civilization. That's what the whole Elon Musk and all that's on Mars is all about. So I got really into it. Now, one of the reasons why I built the underground shelter that you mentioned, called Fort Terra Nova, that was back in 2012, was because I was analyzing the precession of the equinoxes, the movement of the stars across the sky, the constellations across the sky. I noticed that they were speeding up. Based on my calculations, it was moving, instead of 27,000 years for one cycle, it was actually averaging around 25,000. I'm like, are the books wrong? Are these great astronomers wrong, or what's going on? And the more I dug into it, the more I looked into it, I realized the only thing that can explain this is if our sun is orbiting something. It would need breakaway speed. And it would, it would speed up and it would slow down, speed up and slow down. So I started digging into that. I found out that they had something they were calling nemesis out there, something that they couldn't exactly say what it was, but they were saying there was a huge object out there orbiting our sun, and our sun was orbiting it. And they found it about 3 or 4 years ago. They labeled it Planet 9, but really is a brown dwarf star. They found a brown dwarf orbiting our sun. So we live in a binary solar system. We don't have one sun, we actually have two. One's a brown dwarf, which you can only see with 2-mass infrared mode on your telescope. You have to have a digital scope to see that because it's so dim, you can't see with the naked eye.
Is the sun black or white?
The sun is white. It's bright white, so it's not black actually. If you actually were able to go out and look at the sun above the atmosphere, you'll find out that it's actually bright white light. When it hits our atmosphere, it scatters, and when the light breaks down, we see more of the yellows because the blues are kept up there. So the sun actually is bright white.
Well, some say that the sun is black, but it's the charge of light that gives it the appearance of white.
Well, it's a nuclear explosion. Now, what's interesting about the sun is that a lot of the light doesn't even get to the surface for like 100, 200,000 years. So it could be both, a little bit of both. It could be that it is a dark sun, but the light is what we can see. For example, the sun is 8 light minutes away from Earth. So if the sun went dark right now, we'd have daylight for 8 minutes. Now the light,
And that's 90 million miles away.
90 million miles away, right? And the light that's formed on the inside from the collision of the atoms on the inside, the nuclei, when they're colliding and splitting, that light doesn't go straight from the center core right out to the outside of the sun. It actually meanders through the inside of the sun for thousands and thousands of years before it releases itself and leaves the corona. Then it takes 8 minutes to get to Earth. So the light that we're experiencing right now is hundreds of thousands of years old before it even got to us. You know what I'm saying? Before it left our sun.
So light is very interesting. You understand me? I want to talk about light and water for a second. Look like we might get to the whole elemental period by the time we're done with this conversation. As human beings, the things that we should know the most about, we know the least about.
Yeah.
And that's being a human being. Right?
Yeah.
You know, water and light, right? We are light beings and we are water beings.
Yeah.
You understand me? Wholly. So I studied that to understand the effects that the environment has on myself.
Yeah.
That's knowledge of self, to the knowledge of cells.
You got to do that.
So, you know, what is it about light itself as a messenger of information that is important that we observe from the things that we eat, besides the breakdown just gave, right? Where we go to, but at the same time being a way for our brains to be able to travel, right? Like, and then can you correlate it into biophotons? You understand me?
Right.
You know, when I be thinking, I just be having thoughts, so they jump over. That's why I had to call this show a conversation. So, as light beings, what does that mean?
Well, one thing people don't understand is that we are all made of actual light. Well, everything in the third dimension is made of light. And so we are light and light is us. We know that the illusion of this avatar body and this chair I'm sitting on and the table that you're sitting at, the illusion of it's there. But what is this? This is slowed down light waves. When you slow light down and then consciousness interacts with it, it collapses it into what we call solid matter. So solid matter is actually an illusion.
Right.
For example, the only thing stopping my hand from going through this chair is the repulsion of the electromagnetic frequencies. I don't actually touch the chair. You don't touch anything.
Yeah.
And so if I can phase shift the atomic frequency of my hand to match the same frequency of the atoms in this chair, I pass my hand right through it because atoms are 99.999% empty space.
Right, like pouring liquid into liquid.
Exactly, you know. That's why when galaxies merge together, like we're merging with a galaxy right now called Sagittarius, you don't see any real collisions happening or anything around.
Shout out to my Sagittarius out there.
Yeah, because, you know, galaxies are mostly empty space, just like atoms. Everything's a fractal. So we are light beings, and also, because of that, we're a fractal. We have consciousness, which is also light. And
what is a fractal?
A fractal is when you take, for example, if you look at a hologram, and you go to one part of the hologram, one tiny piece, and look at it, you'll see the entire image in that smallest piece. The only thing you lose is a little bit of resolution, okay? And so it's important for people to understand that this entire realm is a fractal of a whole. In other words, as above, so below.
So if we look at an atom, it gives you the whole thing.
It gives you the whole thing, absolutely.
So human beings, would you consider a fractal of the universe?
We're a fractal of the universe. And our consciousness, even though it's one consciousness, it's also a fractal of the main master consciousness. And it's really incredible that every thought that you think in your skull, it leaves your skull as a form of a light wave. Every time you think.
Talk to him then.
Yeah, man. Every light wave, every time you think. And we know this because we could put a cap on your head in a laboratory, put a little electrodes on it, sensors, and tell you to think about something, and it's going to show up on the computer screen because the computer's reading the light waves coming out of your skull. We can't see those waves because we can only see 1% of the light spectrum as human beings.
Right.
We're limited. We don't see gamma rays. We don't see ultraviolet.
What affects us the most?
Yeah, exactly. Those are the things that are all around us that are really interacting with us all the time, and our brains too.
Right. And that's what I was getting to with the water, because the ultraviolet radiation is what causes that fourth phase to flow, like blood flow within our bodies and things of that nature, by creating a separation between positive and negative charge. And in between that small space right there is where it creates that charge and flow. And they was doing a study where they tried to take two prods, put one on the other end to create energy.
Yeah.
Right? But go ahead.
Yeah, so that's what it is. So, we have this power of thought, which you were talking about having the ability to even travel through light, leaving your mind and traveling light. You can actually connect to other realms, other dimensions through conscious thought. Quantum entangling your light waves with other light waves that exist in the universe, not only in the third dimension, but even multiple dimensions.
Right. So like quantum entanglement, for those who don't understand, are two basically atoms that are entangled with one another, even if they are at vast distances.
Right.
Right. And Einstein called it, spooky. Right, because he didn't understand what was going on.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But we understand. It ain't spooky. It ain't spooky.
He said a spooky action at a distance.
Yeah.
And you can entangle atoms, you can entangle photons, which are lights. Right. So
do you think that's what happened when people fall in love? They consider to be soulmates?
I think it happens. Well, your mind can entangle with somebody on the other side of the universe. A lot of the times, you can say, I came up with this great idea.
Right.
But you really didn't. You just downloaded that idea because you entangled with the information.
Entanglement.
That's all it is. All information actually exists. And now, like big-time mainstream quantum physicists and theoretical physicists are admitting that this is true now.
Yeah.
Like it's not woo-woo science no more. This is like what you're getting taught in university. When I was at MIT studying applied neuroscience, one of the things we learned about was this exact thing. The fact that not only can you walk in a room, like you were saying earlier, and you can sense the vibe, and you can actually transmit negative or positive energy to somebody. If somebody's at a low frequency, and you walk in positive and high frequency enough, your light being can actually raise their energy level.
Right.
And if you're not high enough and they're low, they can actually drop your energy level.
Right.
It depends on how strong you are consciously. And then also we talked about the fact that we can entangle with information throughout the entire multiverse. You can actually then, if you can put the action behind it, it could be one of the greatest inventions. It could be Web3. It could be, whatever we got going on now. NFTs or whatever. All this stuff comes from other places.
So biophotons is what I wanted to get to. Because biophotons to me is very interesting because I think it's like taking the concept of science and physics and being able to apply it. You understand me in a real world sense and connect, yourself and your willpower, right? Biophoton levels, which is basically, for those who don't know, is light within the human body.
Right.
And so one of the things that they studied was the fact that during a time that a patient was sick, you understand me, the light that they emitted glowed brighter, right? And of course that was because the body was working to heal itself.
Yep.
And the thought process was that if you go back to ancient human being origins, that those human beings were just light beings, complete light beings. And as I'm positing this thought right now, as melanin, you understand me, overtook those bodies, and you're talking about, that very dark melanin, and then you have light, piercing out of that, which used to be where hair follicles are, you understand me? Then you're talking about a blue aura, or a blue hue, right? And so in ancient texts where you see a lot of the blue representation of gods or beings, there were the representation of the original man and woman as light being. I want to talk about something, because when we talk about power, culture is probably, our culture specifically, which is getting to our spirit, powers this world. We are the battery. Melanin is a battery itself, right? And when we talk about that, I was studying, years ago, the Carson scale.
Okay.
Right? When we're talking about type 0 to 1, 3, 4 civilizations. And when I was studying back then, I would relate everything I learned in physics and science to black culture and how it could be an analogy to where we can utilize to liberate ourselves. So for those who don't know, this Carson scale is a model of, how civilizations can grow, if you will, right? Into more efficient system and models, or more control, right? So we are currently, what I believe, like 0.5, but type 0 civilization.
Type 0.
Right, type 0.
We crawling though, we trying to crawl.
We try, the concepts are getting out there.
Yeah, it is,
but, the politics are in the way, to be honest.
That's what happened, the polytricksters.
Yeah, the polytricksters. So type 0 is saying that we get our energy from dead coal and plants. You understand me? That, our energy systems, number one, are inefficient. You understand me? And that's why we steady have these energy wars. You understand me? That
Yep.
we are dependent upon these resources,
Yeah.
that we don't have the ability to reproduce ourselves. You understand me?
Yep.
And or have control over supply.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that's why human beings are always at risk for extinction. Ideally, is because we don't control external things outside. You understand me? We can't control a meteor hitting this planet. We can't
Right.
control the sun exploding. We can't control any of those things. So that's why man now just wants to jump to another planet. You understand me? Because he don't believe that he will be able to gain control before it's too late, right?
Exactly.
But a type 1 is more so talking about the ability to control weather, control earth, control the sun, or at least in a sense being able to absorb all energy from the sun and utilize that to power the world that is today. So it's interesting because I look at those who are in power, of course, power wants to maintain power.
Yeah.
Right? So it only makes sense that the people that are in power wants to continue to cede power, and they don't want to concede power to anybody else. So when you're talking about playing God, that's what they want to do. If you can't have the population size, we have to figure out another way to maintain control.
Yep.
And AI, to me, is one of those ways to be able to maintain control. You won't have the brain trust anywhere because people outside are no longer just coming in and saying, well, we'll give our brain to America, spark invention and innovation.
Yeah.
There's decreasing innovation and invention in this country.
Yep.
So not only you got AI in the form of artificial intelligence, and I'm 19 keys, so I break things down into 1-9. But A is numerical 1 and I is numerical 9. And that 19 is representation of male, female, conscious, subconscious, you understand me? God itself, because everything is between that 1 through 9.
Gotcha.
Collapse back into a 1. When we talk about artificial intelligence, it's more so not even just AI of artificial intelligence, artificial insemination, artificial ingredients as well, right? And these are all the ways that I see that those are in power are working to maintain power, utilizing AI. Can you speak upon the future of AI and where we headed?
Yeah, definitely. The AI is dangerous. If you look into the ancient Sumerian tablets, you'll discover in the Epic of Gilgamesh, who was considered to be half human, half god. They call him a demigod. His father was Enki, and he had a human mother, according to the tablets.
Yeah.
And they want to send Enlil, who was his uncle, sent him on a journey, a hero's journey. This is the original story of Noah's Ark, by the way. This is where the Bible got it from.
So Sumerian, for those who don't know, the Anunnaki, first civilization?
First civilization, the cradle of civilization, they call it the cradle of civilization coming out of Mesopotamia.
What did they invent?
Roads, city grid streets, bicameral Congress, plumbing systems. I mean, you name it, everything you could think of, schooling and chemistry and mathematics, and they even had a metric system back then. You're talking about, you know, hundreds of thousands of years ago, they had a metric system. And so they literally, the whole modern society we have today came out of Sumer. There's a tablet where Enlil is speaking, and he's showing his sister this crystal tablet, by the way, is what it's called. And he's showing her his plans for all time on this planet. He said, these plans I have here, these plans are going to last for all time. And that's where we're still in it today. We're still got the same polytrickster program he put in back then. They had their own numerical kingship, the way they ran their selves, but they gave humans the political system.
That's a very
And they also installed
idea.
inflation at that same exact time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a very, 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 very interesting idea. So in that system, right, I know that children who are born, and it's anytime you're born in any time, you succumb to a dominant paradigm. The dominant frequency wins, right? And so do you believe that based on, you know, the Anunnaki or Enlil having this crystal tablet, you understand me, where he wrote down his plans for time dominance, you understand me, so that he can conquer ages of time, do you think that it's possible to go against that plan, you understand me, and create our own will for the planet?
Yeah, it can. The program that he put in was so good. You know, we're given a name, a race, and a religion, and we're basically, we grow up defending that whole identity. It's a fake identity. It's not really us. We've kind of forgotten and relinquished who we really are and given it up to this system, this institutionalized system that was put in place thousands of years ago. But if we really come together, that's the biggest part we got to do. We got to come together and stop all this divide and conquer. you're this religion, I'm this thing, or you're this light skin and I'm this dark skin. All this stuff, we gotta, black men want to fight black men all the time. We want to attack each other socially now on social media because you're doing too good and I'm not doing as good as you. We gotta drop all of that. We gotta stop all of that and we gotta synchronize. We gotta realize that we're better together than apart. Not tearing each other down, fighting each other, slapping each other, all this kind of crazy stuff.
Yeah.
We got to come together and we got to realize, man, how can I bring a piece of the puzzle? How can you bring a piece of the puzzle? You know what I'm saying? Just sitting here talking to you, you got pieces of the puzzle that I don't have, and I got pieces of the puzzle that you don't have. We can start building a whole doggone puzzle. We can put a puzzle together. And you add more people. Next thing you know, that picture, that painting is amazing.
Yeah.
We can make a mosaic.
Yeah.
And so until we get to that point, though, we're always going to be bickering and fighting and arguing over resources and pocket watching and hating and worrying about this and worrying about that, because that's the program they instilled into us. We got to now override this DNA and this RNA programming code. We got to say, you know what? We got to talk to ourselves. You know what? I'm being a hater right now. I'm being a troll right now. I'm pocket watching right now. I'm being jealous right now. Why am I doing that? And analyze inside of ourselves. Why am I doing this? Why do I feel like this? And work on our internal self and learn how to not be that way. Learn how to give somebody the benefit of the doubt. Learn how to try to work with somebody. Learn how to ask better questions so you can understand better instead of getting angry. And learn how to control your emotional state. And when we can do that and we can link up and we can make big power moves together, that's when the world's going to change.
That's very powerful. You understand me? And of course, it's something that we've known but not been able to do.
Yeah.
So we talk about DNA, right?
First of all, people have to understand that DNA is a storage medium. It actually stores data and information. So when we say things like your program code and you're operating off your code, it's actually a true scientific statement. 1 gram of DNA can hold 433 petabytes of data. There was one scientist, George Church, replicated his ebook 80 billion times and downloaded it onto 1 gram of DNA, which is one drop on the tip of your finger.
80 billion times.
80 billion. What he did was he realized that DNA stored information. He was like, wow, our body is full of data. The whole human body is full of data. Billions and billions and billions of petabytes of data. And what he said was, he realized you can take data from a server, a computer, and convert it from zeros and ones into A's, C's, T's, and G's, which is what your DNA reads. And then you can actually download the data into the DNA and store data in a volume instead of storing it linear, like time, one arrow. But when you can store it in a volume, you can store much more information. So then he replicated it 80 billion times, and then he transferred it from DNA, from A's, C's, T's, and G's, back into zeros and ones and uploaded it back into a computer. So he recognized that DNA is also a server. He's like, man, this is incredible. So we have this ability in us to move data and information. Now, because of something called epigenetic memories, we know that 15 to 20 generations before us, that programming code was downloaded into our body. So you're born with this hard-coded information already in your body. Most of it is only, though, this is the sad part, is only trauma that came from previous generations. All the slave beatings and whoopings and the separation of loved ones and the buck fighting and all that stuff, it's in your body. That's why when black people start feeling like I'm depressed, I got PTSD, but they don't know why. I'm feeling down or ill or angry or whatever. A lot of it's the epigenetics. So to overcome this, what scientists realize, you can actually start to re-encode that DNA by doing simple things. Simple. One thing is, write down 10 positive affirmations about yourself, and then speak those out loud 3 times a day, out loud, for 21 days. You begin to start to believe those cymatic frequencies coming out of your mouth, that your body is actually listening to the information. Like you said before, the body is mostly water. The water has memory. The water in your body speaks conscious energy. So when you are releasing that conscious energy into the atmosphere, your body is then absorbing it back into the water, and then the light force energy is rewriting your DNA. And so we can actually rewrite our DNA. We can change the way we think and see and feel about ourselves just by speaking out loud. Like you said, meditation, and I love travel. That's all I do is travel nonstop. You already know that. That's going to enlighten and open up, broaden all your horizons. It's going to make you see things from other perspectives and understand. It's going to raise your consciousness. Traveling, I tell people all the time, leave your zip code. You got to.
It may not be cars for miles,
Yeah.
and they will still follow that system,
Yeah.
right? I want you to touch on the ideas of systems. You know, because institutions is what I focus on, like the reality of we building institutions are only things that can dominate existing systems.
Right.
But what is the energy form of a system to where it actually has real power and control over human forms?
Yeah. Well, the way that they built all these institutionalized systems that we have that are controlling mankind, they're all predicated on fear. You'll find that fear is the biggest thing. For example, you go to school, if you don't get good grades, you're going to get in trouble. You know, you won't pass the next grade. If you act up in school, you might get, if you don't stay in line or whatever, you might get spanked with the ruler or the paddle or whatever. You know, obviously on the street is follow these exact rules or you're going to go to prison. You know, so they have all these systems in place. And these systems that they put in place, when they have these little fear factors built into them, even religion has a lot of fear factors put into it.
Absolutely.
People fall in line because why? Fear, the body pays attention to fear first. The mind is always, okay, there's fear. I got to stop this fear. I got to do whatever it takes to not allow this, whatever this fear is, to happen. I don't want it to happen to me. So the body goes into fight or flight mode, and then it starts focusing on the fear. Once the body does that, these people who rule, the ruling elite, they know that we got them with the fear. Now we can manipulate them to do whatever we want. So they always do the same thing. They create the problem. Okay, they wait for the reaction, and then they provide the solution to that problem. So they're actually manipulating all sides of it based on fear. The fear is a key thing in all these institutions that has us locked in, because people, when that fear hits them, they don't recognize that fear is not real. False evidence appearing real, that's what fear is, right? The acronym. But for them, it's as real as it can be. But in true reality, fear is a choice.
Yeah, fear comes from ignorance.
Yeah.
You know, once you know something, there's nothing to fear because you have all the data. You know exactly how to move, what not to do, exactly what it is, what's not. You know, and once you come to that realization, it gives you so much power over all.
Yeah.
Right? And so becoming fearless, you understand me, is key.
Yeah.
Our bodies all automatically store systems to tell us fight or flight.
Yeah.
That in moments of situation is giving us a signal that you are in danger.
Yeah.
So this danger needs to teach you to make a decision.
Exactly.
Either this tiger that's coming right now, you understand me, you're going to stand very still and hope that it doesn't attack you, or are you going to run, right? Or are you going to fight?
Yeah.
You understand me? Because they're fright, flight, then fight. You understand me? And I think that that's one, and the fight is the decision that you have.
Yeah.
That even if this tiger is so close, I can't run, I can't stand still now, not here. I have to figure out a way where I'd rather go down fighting.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the part of human decision making that is never deposited as an idea of this is an option.
Yeah.
That you can always choose to fight. In every moment, in every situation, even if the certainty is death.
Yep.
You understand me? Because at least you would die being alive.
Exactly.
You understand me?
Exactly.
But to freeze or just to run, because there's times where, you know, flight is the most, you know, intelligent option that you have, right? But fighting, there's something so powerful and majestic about that, because that's the human spirit colliding with whatever force that is in front of it.
Yeah.
When you see two boxers fight, those are spirits going at it.
Right.
And whoever has the most will win. You understand me? Not even sometimes who has the most skill or better technique.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's all about who got that greater spirit.
Yeah.
Because the fight is often won before you get into the ring.
That's right.
There's one spirit that's already decided, whether it's deep into their consciousness, subconscious, where they don't even know it yet.
Yeah.
They've already decided that they're the loser. You cannot forget about the story of time.
You can't.
And I ain't gonna ever call it history. History is just the lies.
Yeah.
The story of time is about what happened on this planet, the true history.
The true history.
And if you ever, if a white person or black person, brown, yellow, orange, all these frequencies of colors that represent subscriptions to different cultures, ideologies, values, norms, rituals, ever want to have a place where there's commonality and trust and alignment, you have to accept the truth of reality. Not the stories that was told by the winners and conquerors that fit the propaganda of the controllers and rulers, but the true story on this planet Earth. That's the only way we get to a true compromise between the people on this planet Earth that have a treaty of understanding. You
I
understand
always
me?
tell people the past is prologue. People say, why do you always study the past? Why are you into this ancient texts and ancient books and all? Because until you understand what happened back then, you won't be able to build a future. The future is going to be built based on what you know about your true past and your true history. If you can't figure out at least as close as possible to what was happening back then, the future is still going to be a gray area.
Aliens.
Yeah.
Let's talk about aliens.
Yeah.
I can't have Mr. Billy Carson on here without talking about aliens. Do you believe in aliens?
I believe in aliens.
Are you an alien?
Well, we're all aliens. You know what I'm saying? So
alien might answer like that. Some people say this brother be thinking, man, he might be an alien.
A lot of people say that, but I think that we are the aliens. When you talk to the Aboriginals, I went to Australia. I went on a walkabout 8 miles out into the doggone nowhere, nothingness. I mean, just out there, man, with the fires.
Yeah.
Okay. This is right before the lockdown came, and I'm out there looking for these ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs in Carryong 9 in Australia, which we found them. We sent those glyphs to the Board of Antiquities of Egypt, and they authenticated them as being authentic Proto-Egyptian hieroglyphs. And so my conversation with the elders was, what is your homegrown, handed-down verbal history? Because they have a verbal history. And the Aboriginal elders said that they were seeded on this planet. They said that the Pleiadians brought them to Earth, and they were the first people on Earth. Those are black Aboriginals.
Who are the Pleiadians?
The Pleiadians, if you look up in the sky at night, there's this area of the sky where they call them the Seven Sisters. Homer's Iliad talks about them. They're talked about in the Bible, talked about in Sumerian tablets. The Greeks, the Romans, they all look up to the Pleiades. It's actually, we call them the Seven Sisters because only 7 bright stars you can see with the naked eye, but there's many more stars there. But in that region of the sky, according to so many ancient texts and so many ancient civilizations, there was advanced civilizations there. Before this area had any inhabitants, that was the region or sector of the galaxy that had a lot of life. But a big war broke out. And in this war, there was something being used called the Brahmahanda weapon, okay? The Brahmahanda weapon, which actually could destroy planets. And this weapon would blow up planets. And imagine if you were in a star system and there's planets blowing up, planet-sized debris is crashing into your planet. So this created a space refugee situation, kind of,
Space refugees.
Yeah, space refugees. And they started fleeing and going out to different stars. Orion, Aldebaran, Zeta Reticulus, all these different star systems, Sirius, Draco. This is why
they had the Draco?
Oh yeah, the Draco star system's up there. That's what the Great Pyramid in Giza in Cairo is aligned with those, with Draco, Aldebaran, Orion, and Sirius. And so we were like, man, what's going on here? So the more you dig into this text, it's like, man, these people fled from war, re-established themselves on other planets, and eventually found this solar system and came down here and created another breakaway civilization. These were the Atlantean people. Now, when you analyze the text, it gives descriptions of these peoples from time to time. And if you look at, for example, the Sphinx in Egypt, you look at the features on the Sphinx, you can see this, it's a face of a black person, right? And what's interesting is some of these Anunnaki, they were more albino. Not all of them. Some had albino type skin. They weren't Caucasian white, but they had albino skin, but they had the African features. Some of them had blue eyes, but they had the knotted hair.
Like Prometheus.
Right, kind of like that. But Prometheus is still kind of really more almost like milk white. If you look at a black mulatto, a black person that has that, that skin condition,
glow.
And but they had the knotted hair, knotted blonde hair, and blue eyes. A lot of them,
like the Aborigines.
Yeah, like the Aboriginals, and also the people of Melanesia, right here, in Asia. And so I did a whole story on those, a whole TV show on those before. So I really dug deep into it. I was like, wow, these people are really potentially not from this planet. And so the more you analyze it and realize, wow, then other people from other star systems brought humans here. This is like, this Earth is like
parents abandoning their kids?
No, what it was is like they were trying to find a place to keep their civilization going. Not something like the species going. Okay? And so that's why you have people that look Asian and people that look Caucasian and people that look black and people that look, there's a mixture of people according to what I've read, that appear to be dropped off here. This is like an abandoned seed colony, this planet.
Now, from my studies, there's no records of Caucasians past 6,000 years.
See, Caucasians are the newest race on the planet. They're the newest race. If you look at the Sumerian tablets, the Caucasians came from out of the Caucasus Mountains. It says something to the effect of when they were in the Caucasus, they then, he said, the exact terminology was that they, there's a certain term that they use for that. Not manufactured the Caucasian, but they said that they had, the word will come back to me. It's like they made them in a way. It's something, it's a terminology that they use, it'll come back to me, that how they made the Caucasian, but they're the newest being on the planet, according to these texts. The other races were already here. We had blue people, green people, you had black, you had yellow. Yeah.
This will be a great movie.
Yeah.
Now, there's a belief that, based on studying the Anunnaki, that they are coming back. You understand me? Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, in all the texts, they always say that they're going to return. The reason why they left was there was a pyramid war. It was the second pyramid war. Amun-Ra, also known as Marduk. You can look up Marduk's name in the Torah. He's in the Bible. He's in the Sumerian tablets. These guys everywhere. He's Amun-Ra. He started a war because he wanted to extend his kingship. He wanted to take over kingship in other areas that he wasn't supposed to on the planet, and so forth and so on. And so that war was nuclear. They used weapons, and the reason why you know it's nuclear because the description of the way that the people were dying, it was that they said the black people, this specifically says that their nails were falling out, their hair was falling out, blood was coming out of their eyes. This is radiation sickness, obviously. And so we know that it was a nuclear war. When you go into those regions, the Mohenjo-Daro in the Indus Valley, the buildings there turned to glass. They're still sitting there. The bodies are still laying. The bodies are laying in the street, holding hands. No animals have scavenged on those bodies. They're still laying there. You go to Africa, to Cairo, and you go to Giza. If you put your hand in the sand and pull up, every now and then you pull up balls of glass. That's what they used to carve the scarab beetles out of, because they're making an ode to the gods for the war that happened. So to turn sand into glass, you have to have 3,000 degree temperature blast. All right, so we know that there was a war that happened that created this situation. So it's just really amazing, man. The technology we have now is just a copycat of what they already had back then, and that war is what really caused them to want to flee. In one of the tablets, Enki goes to Anu and says, "Can you please stop the evil wind?" That's what they call it. That's nuclear fallout. He's like, "There's nothing I can do. Forebode and get in your ship." And so he told him, like, "Turn around, man, get in that ship. We got to get out of here because this thing is coming." And they said that that evil wind covered the land and killed all the animals, the people, and everything else. And a lot of these people never came back. But they said that, that they'll be coming back. Now, there's two ways to look at it. One way is some of the offspring is still here on this planet. Probably most likely maybe that ruling elite class. And then it's said that there will be some type of a future situation where they will return and take back claim of the rightful kingship of this planet. So, and in the Emerald Tablets, it says the same thing, which is interesting because it's even older than those tablets. It's like 36,000 years old, and it says that far in the future, an enemy will come from deep space. So it's pretty interesting.
No, it's definitely interesting. Now, what are the different type of aliens? Because you got the grays, you got the blacks. I want to know, what's the different type of aliens?
There's all kinds. You have black people. I think most of the UFOs that are flying overhead are being piloted by black people. That's my personal opinion.
Now, that's very interesting because Honorable Elijah Muhammad said decades ago that there was a mothership up there, you understand me? And he gave a full description of the mechanics of the mothership, how it was piloted, you understand me, how the people lived.
Wow.
And he said, I believe it was made in Japan, you understand me, during that time. And, he was the first to introduce the concept of like aliens and telling the government, you understand me, that the mothership was going to destroy them with these different type of bombs that they had. And he gave a breakdown on how many baby planes that were there and that there were black men and women up there. Like, it's a very detailed account. And then after that, in the 1930s is when they started to create those programs towards observing UFOs, and then started to create counter stories of why they were UFOs, right?
Yeah.
But the Honorable Elijah Muhammad maintained his knowledge of UFOs and the account of their existence, and so does the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan today. And number one, I don't believe the UFO community gives any real reverence and appreciation to what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was doing back in those days.
Yeah.
And
if he did that, he was ahead of his time.
Oh yeah, for surely. Oh, he was ahead. He was breaking it down back then. You understand me? He was like, listen, man. Here's the people of Mars. We got the mothership up there.
Yeah.
You understand me? There's black people in the mothership. They got the baby planes. They got these certain type of missiles.
Wow.
When they drop, it's gonna do this, that, and the third.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't without detail.
Wow.
You understand me? And he told them this is how it worked. This is how they were able to build it. This is how they funded the sources to be able to build it. They were a collective of scientists that was able to come together. Like, how long it stays in the atmosphere? How long does it have to come down here? Like, it's a very detailed account.
People just get scared. They think that we're talking about little green men.
Yeah.
Now we're talking about men and women, people that look just like us.
Yeah.
The majority, I think, of people that we calling aliens look just like us, in my opinion.
I would imagine, and if you got to understand, if I'm an alien, I'm up there, I wouldn't want to come to Earth.
Yeah.
Nah, guess what? I'm not coming down there.
Yeah.
You understand me? That would just make sense to me.
Yeah, it does. See, it was easier for them to interact with people when we had less technology, and we were more green, so to speak, because there was no immediate threat on their life. There was nothing we could do. Matter of fact, we saw them as gods. Right. Now, with all this technology and the military-industrial complex wanting to weaponize anything they can get their hands on, they want to take them down, they want to shoot them down, they want to get their hands on them and see what they can turn into weapons. What kind of technology can we convert into weapons for ourselves? How can we reverse engineer this stuff? That's all they're focused on.
Yeah, we wonder if aliens are hostile, but we're already hostile.
We're the hostile ones.
We hostile to aliens of other countries.
Yeah, I know.
So I know we're going to be hostile to aliens from other planets.
I know. It's crazy. It's
like,
true.
I guarantee. You understand? Be like, you don't want to let a human being to over one border to another. So you're telling me I'm coming from another planet and y'all gonna let me come kick it and share resources in life? Ain't no way, no how.
Not gonna happen.
Especially, but the whole saying is that, you know, if aliens have the technology in which we believe they have and the abilities to travel, and that means that number one, they're much far advanced than we are, which requires a greater level of intelligence. And so they would have more capabilities of wiping us out than we ever could imagine.
Oh, yeah.
You understand me? In ways that we wouldn't be able to see.
Yeah.
Right? As much as the human intelligence has evolved collectively, because, you know, I don't think that the average human being is that much more intelligent than somebody in the 1800s.
Right.
Besides the fact we have more access. And the average person is not that intelligent.
No.
That's why we
Well, the
easily
smartphones
control.
are making us dumber.
Yeah, that's a super fact.
Yeah.
You understand me? And the radiation is destroying our ability to focus.
Yeah.
And human beings collectively need focus in order to grow.
Yeah.
You understand me? Like, if you don't have no focus in your life, you're distracted to the point where you can't give birth to none of your ideas. We can theorize based on our level of intelligence, but who's to say that the math that we have is like not baby's math?
Right.
You know, and then we discover a completely new type of math that allow us to phase through things and open portals and create different versions of reality and different colors to see. Like, who's to say that there's not a science like that exists? But the same way where we can only see a certain spectrum of the light, maybe our minds can only compute certain spectrum of knowledge.
That's so true. We can only compute to a certain amount because it's only based on our level of consciousness.
Right. But that also means to me, though, that I don't believe in the idea of impossible. You understand me? I think that there's something that exists that I don't measure size based on value. So it's like, let's say human beings are just a cell, you understand me, and the bacteria of the universe.
Yeah.
You understand me? That doesn't mean we don't have value, because the way that we experience reality is our value in itself.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You understand me? That we are energy and that we wouldn't be in existence if we didn't have a level of value.
Yeah.
It's just that I think we come up with more systems to devalue ourselves than anything.
Right.
We think about how vast the universe is only to think about how small we are.
Right.
Human beings need to constantly downgrade themselves and constantly demean themselves to put themselves in their own place.
Right.
And in that thought process, we are becoming our own gods, sitting ourselves saying that humble yourself, humble yourself.
Yeah.
We try to find a million different ways to humble ourselves.
Always, always.
Because that would mean to tell me that our brain is working to control how powerful we really are.
Whatever I want to do, I just do it.
Yeah.
Because I see it as we are this, we are this entity here, and the universe is vast. But I see it as I'm a part of something huge. Where other people see it as I'm just a speck in the dark.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
But so let me ask you this: you discovered a black satellite?
The Black Knight satellite. I didn't discover it; it's already up there. But
well, you know how the rules on this planet.
Yeah, I know.
You know, we're going by Christopher Columbus law.
Yeah.
You discovered this, man.
Yeah. Well, of course. And so what happened was I had heard about it and researched it years ago.
Well, first, let's say, what is the Black Knight satellite?
Okay, the Black Knight satellite is
an object. Like Batman got his.
I know.
It's
crazy. This is real crazy. So this is an object orbiting the planet. And it's well documented. It's actually on the space agency servers. It's on the military servers. It's on university website servers. The object is that they've labeled it space junk. So what they're saying is this object, which was detected all the way back in the late 1800s by Nikola Tesla first. He picked up a signal from it. Then the 1950s, ham radio operators picked up the signal again and actually decoded the signal. 1960, Duncan Lunan wrote an article. He's a journalist for Time magazine. Wrote an article about the object. It made Time magazine, and then many more consequential articles came out about this object because why? It was changing its own orbits. It was in a first equatorial orbit, then it went to a polar orbit. When Sputnik was launched in 1964, it followed Sputnik to the moon. This thing is under intelligent control. Mm-hmm. It's about 15,000 tons. And so what happened was the United States saw it up there, Russia saw it up there, Russia thought it was us, we thought it was Russia. Then we both said, wait a minute, we can't launch nothing like this. We don't even have this kind of technology. And so they were like, damn, what is this? So they really started looking at this thing and analyzing it. And we finally got a chance to see it close up personal with the STS missions, the space shuttle missions. Took HD quality video and photos of this thing. And they were like, wow, we're going to call it junk because we don't know what this is. They're afraid to touch it. They're afraid to move into it and try to, take a piece of it to see if they don't know if it's going to have a defense mechanism or whatever. They just know this thing is orbiting the planet in a way that it shouldn't be orbiting. And the fact that it is giving off a signal that has been decoded as being the Epsilon Boötis constellation. But that's not a big deal. But the big deal about that is it's giving the location of the constellation where it was in the sky 13,000 years ago. So this thing could be 13,000 years old. This object is still moving around, still making its own course corrections, and it is still giving off a signal, and the signal is still giving off the location. When you look into the Sumerian tablets, you find out that Enlil owns the Epsilon Boötis constellation, the same constellation that this thing is saying it's from.
So that's probably one of his ships just up there chilling.
Yeah, it's his all-seeing eye. He had an all-seeing eye in the tablets. That's where they got it from for Lord of the Rings and all these things. The all-seeing eye came out the tablets. He had an all-seeing eye, so he could see what was going on the planet at all times. See, when you have a planet
that's why you consider it a satellite.
Yeah, a satellite. When your planet is spinning on its axis and you have something orbiting this way, it's able to take scans of the planet in a way that can give you a view of the entire planet in so many hours. Right? Versus doing this way, you can only get what's going around the equator. But when you do this way, you can see the entire planet. And so he had that all-seeing eye. And what happened was Michio Kaku made an amazing statement that made me want to make this documentary. He said, in Epsilon, this is about 10 years ago, there's a void. It's called the Epsilon Boötis void. It's the largest empty space inside of a constellation that they know of in the universe. He said, but it looks like light is bending around something. He said, this looks like a type 1, type 2 civilization that's cloaked in Epsilon. So when I found out about the signal coming from Epsilon, and Lil owns Epsilon in the Sumerian tablets, he's an Anunnaki, I said, I think this is all linked. And then I found cylinder scrolls that show the Black Knight in ancient cylinder scrolls.
Fascinating, man. I got one last thing to ask you about. You've searched through thousands of pictures from the Mars rover.
Yeah.
And you've actually found a face.
Face, anomalies.
Famous face, though.
Yeah.
On Mars.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us about that, brother.
Well, there's this object in Cydonia. Ironically, they call Cydonia on Mars, this area where there's this face and these pyramids. On Earth, Cydonia in ancient times is Cairo. So they really know what they're doing. They're hiding the truth in plain sight for us. But there's a gigantic 4-mile wide face there. And the face is right outside of a city a pyramid city with a 5-sided pyramid. Now the city, the pyramids, and this other debris, which looks like a collapsed structure, is in a format which there's an angle of 19
Talk to me, man.
degrees. Okay.
Now, before you go to arrive to your next thought process, most people don't know about the number 19, that there are phenomena all across the universe that are at angles of 19 degrees.
That's right.
Including Jupiter's red eye.
Yeah.
You're talking about Yellowstone Park, different volcanoes, all throughout the universe.
Yeah, that's true. And so this is 19-degree angles making this triangle, right, where these landmarks are on Cydonia on Mars. The face, the 5-sided pyramid, and this other area where it looks like a collapsed city. And so Avebury in the UK on Earth, right by Stonehenge, you have this city there where there's these artificial structures built up from dirt, mounds they call them, and these paths through the land. If you take that Avebury ordnance map from the city, which is downloadable online, and overlay it on Cydonia, where the face is located, it's a perfect match. So somebody on Earth mimicked what was already on Mars, but the only thing is this was like in the 1600s.
It was terraforming, you understand me, and replicating what was on Mars.
Yeah, that's what was happening.
But that's some interesting dynamics right there, man.
Yeah.
I think one thing about what we can all agree about this planet Earth is that we don't know everything.
No.
You understand me? And there are schools of mystery and thoughts of mystery that maybe remain mystery for all eternity.
Yeah.
You understand me? Or maybe we know, but we don't have verification. Mm-hmm. And the unfortunate aspect of now is that we need to verify everything so that it becomes evidence as fact.
Exactly.
Because I don't believe the Dogon people actually went to the constellations,
no.
You understand me, and mapped it out and then came back.
No.
I think that they had a connection and an intuitive knowing and understanding that was downloaded transferable knowledge, you understand me, and they didn't have any reason to question it. They wrote it down, this is what we've seen, because this is what came to us.
Yeah.
Why would information come to a people who are pure, uncorrupted from all of the images, information, the information that we get now in society? When I tell you what's a picture of, you know, an alien, or picture of a mountain, or picture of this place, you usually go into an image that you perceive as reality. Yeah. What if it was a color-corrected filter? May never be what you actually think it is until you go and experience.
Right.
So unfortunately, we have all of this data and information in our head, which doesn't allow us to truly think like human beings connected to reality. Yeah. We are connected to the digital structures, and they inform us on what reality actually is. You know, but I wanted to jump off of Earth for a second, you understand me, look above and see things from a different dimension. Yeah. Now, one thing that I do know is that I don't believe we have a beginning nor ending. You understand me? I think that the beauty of human soul and human spirit is that it is limitless. And we find different ways to go through experiences over and over and over. And I think that memories are too heavy to be carried over into whatever other phase that we exist throughout life as energy transfer. So we go through those things consistently. But I believe that, you know, we are a source, you understand me, which gives us that same power. Yeah. And that regardless of wherever you at on this planet Earth, whatever condition, level, system, you know, whatever you believe in, you have the power to produce change. Yeah. And that can be measured scientifically, it can be measured theologically, it can be measured spiritually. There's enough evidence, if you need it, to showcase that you have the power to change whatever condition that you are in on this planet Earth. You understand me? And at the same time, we have to realize that there's a game being played on our backs. And the only way that it's going to change is if we stand up. That's it. You understand me? And we tap into that energy, that inner intelligence that allows us to rule over our spectrum of reality. Yeah. So my brother, I appreciate you tapping into a high-level conversation. Thank you. You most definitely are an alien, but I appreciate your extraterrestrial presence.